Boxing Truth here, back with another video. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now, this is the problem, one of the many problems with the sport of boxing. Boxing sheep scoring fights. Boxing sheep who should not be allowed to score fights. Cheerleading commentating that influences the viewer. Bullshit scorecards like the many scorecards Mannix has delivered. But even he had a more accurate version of the first 3 rounds of that fight between Zurdo Ramirez and Dimitri Bivol. I feel like I'm the only one in the world that saw a competitive fight, a fight where you can argue Zurdo actually won. But it's boxing sheep like this that puts tweets out like this, and then you can see. Actually, I'm not the only one in the world, but it just seems that way. But there are many people that feel the same way I do. But, when you got boxing sheep like this, just scoring it based on familiarity of the opponents, not what's happening in the fucking ring, you got motherfuckers like this influencing other fight fans' viewers' view on the fight. 3-0 Bivol. Really? He looks sharper than when he fought Canelo. Oh, yeah? It was definitely at least 2-1 Zurdo after 3. You can see the people in the comments disagree with this boxing sheep scorecard. Coppinger is another one. You really just have to watch with your own eyes as these boxing sheep try to influence you with their scores. Now, even Coppinger had it 2-1. He had it for Bivol. Disagree. I felt Zurdo won 2 of the first 3 rounds. I know some people gave Bivol the first round just because he landed one little right hand, even though Zurdo was more consistent and landed more shots. That's why I punished Bivol in this fight. He was having a hard motherfucking time closing the distance, being consistent offensively. He landed good clean shots, but it was very inconsistent. A lot of the times he did it for about maybe 10 seconds of the round, which at times he was able to steal some rounds. But he didn't land clean shots in 7 of the 12 rounds. It was a very inconsistent offensive performances, despite him landing the better shots overall. Zurdo landed a lot more of them. He landed a lot more shots. He was a lot more consistent offensively. But Zurdo was being punished for boxing at a distance. He was being punished by some of these boxing sheep. Zurdo needs to come forward. Why does he need to come forward? When he was being effective from the outside. That was his plan. It was actually effective. Bivol was having a hard time stepping to Zurdo, getting into range, and landing shots. It wasn't until after the 6th round Bivol started to have more success. But Zurdo has to come forward to win rounds. Why? Why can't he stay at a distance and outbox Bivol from long range? And making life very difficult for him to get inside. That was his plan. That's what he was doing. And he was effective at it for most of the fight. Was able to limit the damage. Was able to make Bivol very inconsistent offensively. It was one of those fights where Bivol didn't have many of those blistering combinations because he was in there with a much bigger, rangier guy. And I always felt that it was going to be even a tougher fight than the Canelo fight was. But when you have motherfuckers like these scoring fights, easy work, 118, 110. So you gave Zurdo 2 rounds. Simply because Zurdo didn't move forward, boxed from range, and Bivol pressed the fight but wasn't very effective. Only landed shots in spurts, maybe 10 to 15 seconds of a round. Wasn't consistent. wasn't very accurate overall. But because he beat Canelo and because now everyone's in awe of Bivol, he gets more credit than what he actually deserves. To me, Oscar Zurdo got fucking screwed in this fight. They simply were there as the opponent, B side. They were not giving a fair shake from the judges. Zurdo got absolutely no credit for his ring generalship, his body of work offensively, his consistent offense. He never had a chance of getting a decision against Bivol. The fight was definitely not scored accurately. Did Zurdo lose this fight? I don't think so. You can argue he won. At least a fucking draw because that fight was competitive. I felt Zurdo did a little bit better overall, but because of Bivol's cleaner shots, even though it was very inconsistent throughout the fight, that could have been enough to entice a draw, since he is the champion. But my man didn't even get a fair shake with the scorecards. 118, 110. What was it? 118, 110, 117, 111? Bullshit, man. Two judges gave him 3 rounds. Nah. It was definitely a predetermined decision with inaccurate scorecards. It was a very competitive fight where Bivol had a lot of trouble in the first half of that fight, even getting in range and landing consistent offense. But we all know the Canelo rematch is going to be next. This was to preserve the Canelo rematch for Canelo to get his revenge. The Bivol L is already being set up. Hearn's talking about a 168 undisputed clash for Bivol and Canelo to lock horns at 168 for all the belts. It's very enticing. But it's also to help Canelo get revenge in a potential rematch, which is very possible. And the Bivol L looks to be incoming sooner rather than later. Y'all can forget about that Beterbiev fight. It's not going to happen. Hearn is gonna, make sure Canelo wins this time. May even slid an envelope to one of the judges, which he failed to do for the first fight, because when it comes to his, fighters, both guys is fighting and under his promotional umbrella, he does what a promoter should do. Just lets the best man win. Doesn't matter who's the bigger name, who's the bigger star, but it looks like he's going to go back to those practices for this potential rematch. And Canelo might not need any help. He simply underestimated Dmitry Bivol the first time. He didn't take him fully seriously. I mean, how could he? How could anybody have taken Bivol too serious, especially off the performance he was coming off of going into that fight? I mean, people definitely took the odds play, made some money, but looking at Bivol prior to the Canelo fight, I didn't care if Canelo had an off night. You just didn't expect a Russian coming off 6 straight boring ass decisions to get a decision against Canelo, but he did. Those were accurate scorecards. It was a 7-5 fight. Canelo just has to be in better shape, not gas, not underestimate Bivol, and maybe entice him to come to 168, drain him a little, and the Bivol L is going to be incoming to the boxing world. But yeah, it's a damn shame that, the cheerleading, the bias of the scores, simply because one guy is not engaging, or Bivol, who is a smaller guy, man, is pressing he had to press the fight. What the fuck is Bivol supposed to do against a guy of that size? Bivol can't outbox Zurdo from the outside. He can't fucking stay at range with Zurdo. His only chance is to step forward, close the distance, and try to land some shots. That was the only way he was going to win the fight. Zurdo was being smart, though. He kept his distance. He kept his range. And he made life hell for Bivol in that fight, for the majority of that fight. Bivol had some good moments. Overall, I think he landed better punches, but few and far between, too inconsistent, which is what I felt Zurdo was superior in. He was landing the more consistent offense, working every minute of every round, and Bivol will only have success for about 10-15 seconds of a round. Hard to say that he won 7 of those rounds with the type of offense he was displaying in that fight. But it's all good. The Canelo rematch is upcoming. It's going to be one of the biggest fights in boxing. Very enticing rematch, especially if it's at 168. Especially if Hearn decides to maybe even buy a judge for that fight. But it may not be needed. But we'll see. Canelo didn't look good in his last fight. The injury to his wrist may have had something to do with that. But if Canelo is completely rejuvenated 100%, this is going to be a very fucking interesting rematch. And Bivol's going to be the favorite. I'm going to take the plus odds of Canelo. And I'm going to take the chance. And maybe even put Canelo by decision. Make even more money. I'm taking plus money odds of Canelo because you're never going to get Canelo at plus money. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.